Welcome to the Exit Ready Business Podcast, the show where we bridge the gap between running a company and actually being able to sell it. Did you know that last year only 14% of businesses listed for sale actually reached the finish line? Compare that to commercial properties where auction clearance rates consistently hit 70 to 90%. Here's the hard truth. As it stands today, your business might be unsellable, but your office, your warehouse, your commercial footprint, this is your goldmine. I'm David Fisher, known as Mr. Exit Ready. I'm bringing 46 years of experience in business, construction, and property to help you turn your biggest asset into your greatest exit with my Property First Exit formula. Today, we're applying the principles of business growth, exit planning, buyer education to ensure your business stands in that elite 14%. Joining me today is Swart, who is a business builder, the coach of all coaches, a speaker, a delegation coach, a VA, an AI expert. Known for getting your time back with his team of expert AI-trained virtual assistants, and the ultimate masterclass, helping you scale without doing everything yourself. For most of our listeners, the time to exit is something we put off until it's far too late. Lewis, a huge welcome to the show. To get us started, how did this business journey begin? And what were those first critical lessons that shaped you today?
Wow. Well, here's a story you won't normally see on any of my platforms. But when I was young, Dad came home one day with 2 mice. And we basically started breeding mice and selling mice to the kids at school. Okay. And so it was breeding the mice, selling them to the kids at school. We had white mice. Everybody wanted a mouse. And business was booming. 50 cents ago, business was booming. And then we got to the point where everybody had a mouse, and now nobody wanted a mouse, mouse anymore. And we were like going, wow, how do we get rid of these mice? Because now the mice don't stop breeding; they carry on breeding. And so we got Mum's food dye, and we put food dye in a bowl, and we put them in there, and we got the mice to swim through the food dye. And now we had purple and green and blue mice, and I really learned about supply and demand. Like if somebody sees a blue mouse, everybody wants a blue mouse, right? But that was just one of my really early lessons in business. Really, the main lesson came from sitting in the bank. I was sitting in the bank, big boardroom table, and we just sold a business for $5 million, and they're counting out the money. They've got one of those, those note counters on the table. And it's going grrr, and then stopping every $1,000, and they're putting a clip, elastic band on it, and grrr, and then and sitting there just watching them count out all this money, it made me think about my business journey up to that point, and I thought back 5 years, and 5 years before I actually had a plumbing business. I had 10 plumbers. I was 25. I had 10 plumbers. I thought I was invincible. When you're 25, you're gonna solve all the world's problems. I went to a broker and I was like, "Hey, mate, pretty much my attitude would have been like, can anybody afford to buy this thing that I've got, And the broker said to me, "Louis, who does your accounts?" And I said, "I do." And he said, "Who does the quality control?" And I said, "I do." And it was one of those, I, everything pointed to me. And he said to me, "Look, Louis, unfortunately, your business is worth nothing. You can sell it for the trucks and the equipment in the trucks, but it's worth nothing." And I still remember that sinking feeling in my stomach, because I'd worked so hard to get this business to this point. It was my baby. I'd brought this baby all the way up, and now they told me that it's worth nothing. In any case, fast forward 5 years, and I'd now learned how to delegate. So when it came to selling the business 5 years later, I had a public telephone business. I had 200 staff. And to sell that business, we actually approached a broker, and the broker actually got 4 of his friends, and they each put in $1 million, and they basically bought the business for $5 million. But that was because when they asked us who does the accounts, who does this, who does that, none of the fingers pointed to me. So the people could just come in and take over. It was very easy business to come in and take over. And then I immigrated to Australia, had some, epic wins, epic fails. In my last business in Australia, we grew it to turning over 35 million and, employing 450 staff. Now, there's no way I could have done that without learning how to delegate. And, so the delegation to me is such an important component of what we do, because we all try and do it ourselves. We literally, we know the saying, if you want something done right, you need to
do it yourself.
Yeah, so we grew up with that saying. But in business, it's not necessarily right. It may be with some things, but if I want my Canva graphics document done right, I'm not the right guy to do it, okay? I need to delegate that. There's people that are way better at that than me, or way better at accounts. And so my whole thing is about how do I help people to delegate, and specifically when we're ready to exit. If we're ready to exit and we've delegated stuff, it makes it so much easier for us to be able to sell it, makes it so much more profitable, because the new person coming in, they don't have to work out how to do it. They can just get somebody else who's already been trained to do it. So those are my main lessons.
Oh, brilliant lessons. So the big parts of that, just if everyone was listening to those few little nuggets there, was that when the broker asked them, who does this? And Lewis went, me, first time. So that was a big lesson, wasn't it? Because when you went 5 years later, you knew that. So there must have been an aha moment, or probably would have been a shock when it was said that it was worth nothing.
Yeah.
So after that shock, how long did it take you to start delegating? That's probably a very good question, because a lot of people would still put that off for a period of time. Or did you say, right, I need to start delegating tomorrow, or is that like 6 to 12 months later?
I started delegating almost straight away, because
Right.
up until that point, I do the accounts was a badge of honor. I work 12-hour days was a badge of honor. I'd go to a party and be, how's it going? I'd be like, oh, I'm working crazy hours. I'm doing 14 hours a day. I wore it as a badge of honor. I wore it as something to be proud of, that I was like, oh, I'm like, super productive in society because I work 14 hours a day. And when the broker said that, I realized that actually it's not a badge of honor. It just shows that you don't know how to run your business properly. And that was what really got me the most, was that it changed my whole belief system. So, before I believed that it was, something to be proud of. And now I realize that actually there's no monetary value, which means that nobody else values it, which means that it's not something that I really should be proud of. So it was that change of mindset for me, which was a big one. It's a really big one, because we go into business, and lots of us go in as solopreneurs, and then we're working hard, and then we need an accounts person, and we put it off until we literally almost divorced. Okay, we're almost divorced. We've almost had a heart attack. We've almost crashed the car on the way home because we're so exhausted. And then we get somebody. And then our business does a sudden jump. And that person's busy 8 hours a day. And you go, how did I used to do that? How did I manage to do that? But they do what you were doing, plus they're doing a little bit extra. And a really good lesson somebody taught me was, when I was young, I was like, nobody can do it like I do it. Nobody can. And a mentor said to me, he said, Louis, could they do 60% of what you do? And I mean, look, let's face it, you'd have to be pretty egotistical to think that somebody couldn't do a job 60% as well as what you could, okay? I mean, a specialist. I mean, I'm not just the average Joe. I mean, a specialist in that field. And I said, yeah, I think somebody could do it 60% as good as what I do it. And he goes, okay, so you hire your first person, and now you're getting 160% productivity. And then when you hire your second person, you're now getting 220% productivity. So you're going up by 60%. Because most of us go, I want to hire a guy that's exactly like David, okay? And I want him to be able to do exactly what I do, and he needs to know what I know, and he needs to work the 18 hours a day that I work, and and it's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen because, they don't have the same vision that you've got. You've got this, you growing a business to sell it one day, or you've got this, driving force behind you, and you're happy to work 18 hours a day for much less money than what somebody in your role may work for if they weren't growing a business, because we're all looking at that end result. And so, work on the 60%. You find somebody that can do 60% of what you do in an area, and that would be a great hire.
I think another thing is that when you're saying the comment about they can't do it like I can do it, but there's a lot of people I've found that can do it way better than I can do it. And we put a ceiling on ourselves because we think, and then someone else turns up and they think, oh, they can't do this, they do it a different way. And then before you know it, they've done it, what you would take an hour, they've done it in 15 minutes. And you go, what's the story here? Isn't it? And so all of us, going back to the concept of mindset, I'm a big one on mindset. I do a lot with RPM, which is a part of the Tony Robbins platform. And all of those things go back to that mindset. That's the first moving part of the equation. And I love it when you said, with all of this, as you put it all together, there was a mindset change. So you might have had those different roles of badge of honours and different things like that. But ultimately it went to a mindset change where you stepped aside and you were probably surprised that people did it way better than I did it. And it was me, me, me. But there was a whole lot. You're not going to create anything with a me, are you?
Look, absolutely.
It has to be a team.
Absolutely. And I think that our ego actually really prevents us from doing so much that we could actually accomplish. Because that's all an ego thing. Nobody can do it as good as me. Like, really, that's presumptuous. It's an ego thing, right? And I know we taught that from young. But we also taught at school that we should never copy other kids' homework or other kids' work. Don't ever copy them. You have to come up with your own idea. And then we go into business, and literally we look at what's working and we copy it and we make it better, and that's how we do business. So that rule that don't copy other people also doesn't apply. In big businesses they have a research and development department. In smaller businesses we also have an R&D department, but it's rip off and duplicate. So but you take what's working and then you just tweak it so that it's yours, so it's got your flavor, and that's what we do. So, but the ego does stop us. The ego does stop us from actually growing. The ego stops us from letting go of some things that other people could do. And one of the biggest things, David, that people tell me is that it frees up headspace. And I know that for me, we all know the saying, you need to be working on your business. Don't work in your business. We've all heard that saying. But when you're in your business, it's very hard. It's very, very hard because you're in your business and you're doing the daily grind and you don't have time to actually step back and say, hang on, is this actually making me money or not making me money? And I'd love to tell you a little story. This is one of my favorite stories, okay? They're cutting this road, they're cutting this freeway through this massive, imagine the Amazon, okay? Through this Amazon. And there's guys with axes, must be the olden days. There's guys with axes chopping the trees, and they've set up an axe sharpening thing there, and there's a guy just sharpening the axes, and there's people dragging the trees away. And they turn around and they go, where's the boss? Where's the boss? Where's the boss? What the hell's the boss doing? Why isn't he chopping down a tree? And they go looking for the boss, and they find him, and he's actually climbed up the tallest tree possible, and he's actually looking ahead, and he's just making sure that they're actually chopping this entire road in the right direction. And that's where we need to be in our business. We don't want to be the guy chopping the tree. We don't want to be the guy sharpening the axe. We want to be the guy up the top of the tree, making sure that our business is going in the right direction.
I love that story. You want to keep that story because it was like today we have GPSs and we have lasers and all that type of stuff,
Yeah.
and still we can have all of those tools. But if we slightly go like 1 or 2 degrees off, by the time we've grown that, like you say, the little small business and we've turned it into a $5 million business, it might be a $500,000 business, and it just goes off track.
Yeah.
1 or 2 degrees, that can actually go backwards. It doesn't turn into a $5 or $10 million business, does it?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And that owner's on the ground doing everything because I can do it so well that not looking up the top and saying, hey, you're just going off a little bit here. We're just going off a little bit. And you hear it so much about CEOs, which is their role, basically. Like they say, there's a leadership role, yes, but basically they're steering the ship. They're like the captain of the boat, right?
Yeah.
So if we use the boat analogy, what's the captain doing? He's standing behind the what? The wheel, right? He's not down in the motor room making sure all the bits and pieces and everything's going up and down and doing whatever it does in the motor. He's up the top. So he's like the guy up the top of the tree again, but he's steering the boat.
Absolutely. And I mean, the captain of the boat is probably great at making the beds. And he probably could fix the engine if he needed to, and he probably could go and serve the people at the tables their drinks and snacks, and he'd probably be amazing at it. But literally, what's going to happen to the boat? If he's not
Exactly.
up there and he's down there, serving people drinks and making beds, everybody's in trouble. And unfortunately, it's difficult for us to see that lots of times in our business because we're kind of running between making the beds and then up to like controlling the boat and then running down to make people breakfast and control the boat. And so this is the main thing that I get from people is that when they delegate, it actually frees up headspace. And initially, well, I'll tell you what, when I had this business, we grew this business to turning over 35 million. We actually started putting in offshore staff. So we started putting in staff from the Philippines. Now, over 2 or 3 years, we put in 18 staff. 18 staff in the Philippines saved us $45,000 a month in Australia. And what we did with that 45,000 was we took that 45,000 and at the time, we were struggling to hire supervisors. Okay, because on a project it's expensive and it's very competitive, and everybody at the time was paying their supervisors about 120,000. We offered them 150 because the money that we were saving in the back office, with the scheduling and the accounts and managing the competencies, talking to the clients, all that money, that 45,000 a month we saved, we were actually able to use that money to be able to pay supervisors more, which meant that we got the best supervisors came across to us because we had more money. Our competitors couldn't work out how we were doing it, okay? And because we got the best supervisors, we got more work, and so it was just this massive flywheel type thing that started.
So going back on that, so you had the best. So going from me doing it, so now having the best supervisor, so your management team lifted. So once your management team lifted, how did that impact on the team below them?
Look, when you've got the higher level guys, generally the higher level guys are getting paid because they know how to do the work better. Okay, and they know how to manage teams better. I think you definitely have to have people in your team that can manage people. I'm a firm believer that if I have a staff member, that staff member is my best advert or my worst advert. Because that staff member, if they come to work and they're happy and then they deal with the client, they're going to, put that across to the client, and the client will either decide that they want to work with us more or not. So a lot of people spend money on advertising, trying to get new clients, and yet they haven't spent enough time on getting their staff up to speed. They haven't built up their staff to actually know what their products are, or to really understand how to deal with the other staff. And it comes back to the mindset. We all come into business and we've all got our own mindsets that we're bringing in, as do our workers. And a bit off topic, but we kind of go, if I pay them more, they'll work harder. And it's been proven that it definitely is not the case. Some people literally would work harder if you gave them a 4-day work week. Some people would work harder if you let them go home at 3 o'clock in the afternoon to go and look after their kids. Some people would work hard if you let them work from home 2 days a week. Everybody's got their own reason, and they've all got their own view of success. And I found that out very quickly in business was, we go into it and we're like, hey, it's money, money, success is money. And then you realize that it's actually not. Sometimes it is money, because, but sometimes it's not money. Sometimes success is just being able to pick your kids up from school. Sometimes success is being able to just, recover your relationship that's gone a bit wonky because you've been working too hard. And so we really want to find out, what is the success? What is success to the people that are working for us? And then help them to get there, because the more successful they are, the better it's going to be for all of us.
Well, it's interesting you say that. Like the founder of Planet Fitness, when he started, which is obviously now started in America, but he was saying, my whole philosophy was to make my franchisees millionaires. That was his whole focus. I want to make them millionaires. He never ever talked about himself. He said, I want to make them millionaires. And the person he was interviewing said, but you're a multi-billionaire now. And he said, that's correct. But if I focus on them first, then I get rewarded obviously very well. But if they aren't millionaires, then I'm not going to be a billionaire.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, that was just a quick snippet of an interview one time, that his whole focus was making them millionaires.
Yeah.
And obviously when he has a whole range of people throughout the world, you multiply that out. But what a great philosophy. So if you look at that, where you've got a lot of people that the identity and insecurities and everything else that goes on within our business, and how we can't say move aside a little bit, if we think of that, how can we make our supervisors, our managers better? While a lot of people think, if we train them and do that, they're going to go somewhere else. But that's not really true, is it?
Well, I found that for us, the plan was always to just upskill everybody. And I would sit them down and say, where do you really want to be in 5 years' time? And they may say, I want to be working for the government, or I want to be doing something. And I would say, well, let me help you get there. Okay? And I would upskill them. And then, if they're going to outlive your business. Whether you upskill them or not, they're going to outlive your business. And so you upskill them, and then they would move into another company, for example. But when that company needed the services, and they put out a tender for the services, or they're applying for the services, you're the person that's assisted that person to get into the role. They're going to definitely remember you. And so there's that benefit. There's that benefit, like a longer term. Lots of times we think very short term. We think, how can we, we got to make money now. But, if you look at it in a sort of a 10-year, 10-year thing, it's a whole different ball game.
Oh, totally. And like you say, because, it goes back to the concept of the sowing and the reaping. If there's no sowing, there's no reaping, is there?
Yeah.
And in that type of stuff, your intention wasn't, when they said, I want to go for the government, your intention, how can I work this so I can get the next tender? That wouldn't have been front of mind. However, it's like the reciprocity principle. You basically upskilled them on that journey. They went into one of those departments. And so, of course, they were comfortable working with you. They were comfortable with how you're going to deliver, because it's going to look better for them as well, because they've got a reliable source. And I think a lot of people miss on that. The concept when you're just talking about money, and there's nothing wrong with money, but it's still a measure, and it's still a form of storage and everything like that. So you can have $1 billion in the bank and your health is totally destroyed. Yeah. Well, it's in storage, but it's not really helping you, is it?
Yeah.
And a lot of that part really starts sometimes a lot of the journey of when people need to start let go. And that's why I always focus on that property first exit, because a lot of people get very wound up in the process of the business when they're actually sitting on the gold mine of their actual property. And once we start working on that property, and then we move through, and obviously with my 46 years experience and construction and businesses myself in development, we can improve that. But I find a lot of them, once they go down that route, they actually discover, they start, what about we could do this in the business? And I'm not saying anything until later, because I've discovered over these times is that when you start with that, they feel threatened.
Yeah.
But there's no threat when you start with the property. And there's no threat when you start, how can I improve, how can I add value to your existing property? Sometimes you could subdivide it, sometimes you could lease out part of it. That's all upskilling or adding value or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
They start getting on that journey to how can we improve the other. They actually bring that up, but never in the beginning it's a threat. So it's interesting, isn't it? So when you went to I do, and all that type of stuff, it actually is part of that journey, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think the identity, I know I've exited, several multi-million-dollar businesses. And your identity, we definitely attach our identity to it. It's like saying I'm a dad. I'm a dad, and for the rest of your life, I'm a dad. And in business, I know I used to go to barbecues, and people would go, "How's the business going?" I'd be like, "Oh, we've got 10 shops, or we've got 5 shops," and then like, "Oh, we've got 7 shops, or we've got like 8 shops." It was a measure of where I kind of was, And then when I sold that business, who was I? Like when I wasn't a businessman and I didn't have a business, like really, who was I? And it was trying to find my feet. And I remember feeling like, even though we sold the business for $5 million, I remember feeling like maybe it's a fluke. Okay, maybe this was a fluke, and I actually was just super lucky. I was just super lucky, and then we did the next business, and when the next business went really well, and we exited, it was like maybe that was a fluke as well. And it doesn't matter how many of those I've done. Every time it's like, maybe it was a fluke. Maybe it was a fluke. Maybe I'm too old now to actually think, maybe I'm more tired than what I was when I was younger. All these negative beliefs come up in our brain. But we've attached our identity to this thing, and so now I'd go to a barbecue and I'd say, "Oh, we've got 200 staff. Oh, we've got 300 staff. We've got 400 staff, And people were like, "Oh, wow, that's amazing." And then suddenly you go to a barbecue and like, what do you do? And it's like, wow, I'm looking for something to do. It's almost like I'm unemployed. It's like, you're this unemployed guy. And so it's trying to bring that mentality, that identity back into the real world. And I think that's what's so important about what you do, is that you really work on that identity with people. You help them to set up that new identity so that when they actually leave this old identity, it is a smooth transition. And I think that is so important. I wish I had that with the transitions that I did, because it was a kind of abrupt. Like, you can sell your business, and you do the $5 million deal, it's done there, and then you walk out, and it's kind of like, now what? Like, now we've got $5 million in the bank account, but what do we do with ourselves? What do we do now? Where do we start? Where do we go? And that part's really scary. It's really scary, because then you start doubting, like I say, you start doubting everything about you start doubting who you are. And I've gone through your process, and I know that in your process, you've already worked out, well, this is the next stage of my life, And that next stage may be just, I don't know, maybe just cruising around Tuscany, tasting all the wines or whatever. But it's beautiful that you actually set them up with a full identity. backup identity. So, yeah, I think you're doing an amazing job.
Thanks, Lewis. I think a big part of that is see the drive still in you as well, like with all of these different businesses, which technically you could have been doing all of that and you're not today. It's very much a purpose and a passion, isn't it? And I think you have to have, you can flip it around. Some people say, oh, it's the passion first. And I said, I do believe it's the purpose first, because the passion will go with that. It's like lighting the fire. But yeah, what we do with the beyond business side is that it's very much my own journey of construction and how I am now in real estate. Lots of people say, why did you stay in it? You can make good money, you can do all of that. But the candle dried up. And so it was like, what's my next mission? Mission's another bigger step. But it started off with a business concept, turned into a mission. And now here we are on a purpose. And I believe everyone's got that. Because so many people today have got so much skills, knowledge, wisdom. And there's people that around the world that, like one guy was an engineer, right? Been doing it for 40 years. Then he goes and retires. And then I said, so what are you going to do? So I don't know. I said, why don't you be an engineer's coach? He goes, what? How am I going to do one of those? I said, look, I know a guy that he creates these programs and then you can do it. Well, I bumped into him 6 months later and he said, I'm doing what you suggested. And already, I'm just doing 2 days a week. And the way it's projected, because the engineers, I've got those numbers already read, I'm going to make 180,000 the first year. And then it's funny because I bumped into him 2 years later and he says, well, disappeared.
I don't know what happened.
That's right. 2 years later, I bump into him, and then all of a sudden, he said, look, I'm actually feeling guilty. I'm making $280,000. I'm traveling around the world. My holidays are paid for me because I'm actually going to these different coaching events and all the rest of it. I love travel. I never really was one for travel because I never had any time because I was doing 80 hours a week in my business. Now I'm traveling around the world. I'm making $280,000 a year and I'm only really doing 2 days a week. I said, that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
So he's coaching the coaches. Like you're coaching the coaches. He's just doing the engineering part. Yeah. He's helping them. So all of those ups and downs, like I said, never feel guilty because you're shortcutting all of those ups and downs and the losses and different things. I knew his journey was tough because in the GFC he lost money and different things like that. Mm-hmm. You're helping people through that to prevent some of those pitfalls, and now you can share that. So, but you imagine if you stopped and you just went home and played golf and sat in the rocking chair, what would happen then?
Yeah.
How many people have you helped? And he says, well, it's actually like about 150 people. I said, that's 150 companies, which then you multiply the people out of the companies. It could be 1,000 people or more, couldn't it? He said, yeah, it's probably more like 2,000. I said, see? So really in our next chapter of life, as I call it, this is the time really for us to really shine.
Yeah.
And you can look at it in different cultures and whatever. You go back to the Jewish where everyone was supporting each other throughout the whole family network, wasn't it?
Yes.
And basically the fathers were coaching the sons and the grandfathers were coaching, and everyone had a role in that, but they were all passing that on. I think today, where we literally have got all those challenges today, it's more and more needed for us at this age to step up. So, and the other part is that when you were talking about what do I need to do in my identity, a big part of that is that, I'll just give you one more stat on that, was 75% of the people that did sell regret they sold 12 months later. The main reason wasn't the financial amount. That wasn't really the problem. There was about 10% of those. It was actually they had lost their community, lost their identity, and they actually became depressed. Mm. So that could have happened to you. You could have walked away with $5 million. You certainly had a good storage. you certainly didn't lack, but then you could have lacked in all of that part. So, yeah, this is a major part.
I'll tell you a story about that. We walked away, had the 5 million, and I went back about a year later. We prided ourselves. We did public telephones, so we had these public telephones at all the service stations and everything. We prided ourselves in them. And I went back about a year later, and I thought, I'll just drive around and go and look at the shops, you know. And I went to the shops, and the phones were broken, and the handles were off, and they looked disgusting. And I actually just sat in my car and cried. I actually just cried, because it was like I'd grown this. I'd had this baby, this idea, and I'd brought this baby up into the world, and then I'd handed this baby over to somebody else, and they just completely destroyed it. And I didn't realize that I was that emotionally attached to it, because I'd already left. I already left South Africa. I was living in Australia. I had a whole different life. But going back and looking at what they did to the business that they bought was just like it was an emotional thing for me, because we really are emotionally attached to our business. We've given out, let's face it, we've given our business, most of us, if we're truthful, we've given our business more attention, more time, more love than we've given our family, our wife, our kids, our everything. There's nothing else in our life that most of us that are in business have actually given our business more time, and it's and it depends which stage you are in business. Sometimes when you're even when you've got kids, and your kids are wanting to talk to you, and you're on the phone, and you like just 1 minute, you kind of literally, this is a deal that's got to happen. It's almost like you love the business more than what you love the child. And I know that's not what it is, but that's how much emotional support we've given our business, and that's how much we've grown attached to it. So it's not unusual, and it's completely normal to feel when you come to sell, to have all those like really scary emotions come up through it, and that's why they really. Like, your service is amazing. That's why they really need somebody like you just to hold their hand and go, okay, let's go through this. Let's go through this process. You like the adoption agency for business.
I love that. But can I use that line? That'll be brilliant. Adoption for businesses. That's cool. I like to. I've just observed on your. You've got an ultimate masterclass, and it says helping you scale without doing everything yourself. And I know we started on that line, but can you explain what that is? Because that's definitely a tool or a course or whatever, if you explain what that is, that can help our audience. Because I love that, without doing everything yourself.
Excellent. So when I was in business, there wasn't AI. There was computers, and we did it with, I was able to put stuff into computer systems and get it to do a lot of the work for us. And the systems and processes, creating like standard operating SOPs, standard operating procedures, all that was super. It really is important in your business, especially when you want to hand it over to somebody else. And so then I started doing virtual assistants, and I got people in the Philippines and Egypt and South Africa, and they were actually now coming into businesses and then supporting them with all the back office admin type things. And then about 2 years ago, it was all like AI's on its way, AI's coming, and I thought I really got to get smart with AI, because I initially thought that AI would. Because they were sort of talking, and they still say 300 million jobs will be taken in the next 5 years, according to Sachs and Goldman. But they were sort of talking about AI taking over, and so I really went deep into AI. I started like learning everything I could. I started training people on AI, really helping them. I started working out how we could automate stuff in businesses using AI. But I realized that there was still a gap between what we could do with AI or what humans could do. So there's a gap. So some stuff we can actually get a human to do, but if they've got AI training, I mean, it's literally like imagine we're hiring guys to pick up crates in our factory, you know, and, you know, the one guy can come and he can pick up a box and carry it across the floor. And then I say to you, I've got a guy who's got a bionic suit. He can pick up the whole pallet and he can just carry the pallets across the floor. It's not really a competition. So the guy with the bionic suit is really just your assistant with AI tech powered to help them. So the masterclass is all about, it's about showing you when should you delegate. How do you know that it's the right time to delegate? How do you know what kind of tasks to delegate? And there's I'll show you some amazing formulas where you can actually work out if a task is a high value or low value, and it's specifically for each one of you. So to do that. And then I'll show you how you can delegate to a human in the Philippines for, you know, sort of, I don't know, $10 an hour or something. Or you can delegate to AI. I'll show you a whole lot of things that you can delegate to AI in your business straight away. Or what can you delegate to a human that's powered by AI? You know, if you don't really want to, lots of us don't really want to learn all the new fandangled AIs that are coming out every 5 minutes, right? But that's why we've got some staff that actually, they just love that. They love that, and they're learning all the new AI, and they're working out how they can implement it in our business. So that's what the whole delegation thing's about. It's about talking about how we delegate in this new era when we're not only delegating to humans, but we're delegating to pretty much AI as well.
Wow. So if everyone was listening to those, one word, delegate. So we're delegating tasks, when to delegate to VAs, to AI, to humans. In the very first line, wasn't it? You just think of the average business owner who does everything. And now we've discovered the nuggets of how do we delegate. So this is really where the magic is, Lewis. You're actually providing all of those steps. So you don't have to do the heavy lifting. You don't have to even work it out, do you? So what the courses or your masterclass, you go into, someone puts up their hand, that's all they need to do, and then they join it, and then you take them through all of those steps. Absolutely. They can still run their day-to-day business, because you've built, sold, and sold a range of different businesses. It's not like it's come out of a textbook from university that you just went and got a degree in them and the likes. No. So this is a degree of hard knocks, isn't it? Literally, you know what I mean? Back to the press of counting money. I like that one too. That was a good one. But we can't do it on our own because we won't do it. That's probably the biggest problem, isn't it?
Look, I mean, we've all got amazing intentions, you know. Think about, you know, even on social media. How many videos have you saved to, I've got to try and do that later. And then you either save it or you store it somewhere, the video, but you're never going to get around to it. We still live in an age where, you know, to a large degree, we feel like we need to know everything ourselves. And especially as older individuals, you know, when we went to school, the teacher would come up to you and say, "What's the capital of China?" And I remember, you know, I remember because I'd be like, "Oh, Hong Kong," and she'd be like, "Hold your hand out to smack it with a ruler, okay? And you need to know for tomorrow." And then you'd go home and then you'd come back and you'd be like, "What's the capital of China?" And you're like, "Oh, I can't remember what the capital was. Or what was the capital? What's the capital?" You know, and then you get a smack with a ruler until you eventually knew what the capital of China was. You know, I think it's Beijing. Now, you say to a kid, "What's the capital of China?" And they're like, "Dit," and they go, "Here's a million results for the capital of China. Do you want to hear the capital of China in Chinese? Do you want to hear it in like any language in the world? Do you want to see the cameras from the top of the towers? Do you want to see what's actually happening there right now? Do you want to know who the president is?" But we haven't taught people how to filter the information. And that's where AI is changing it. Because AI is filtering it for us and giving us one reply. So we went through an age where we had to learn everything, and we had to know we had to actually know how it worked and exactly each point. Then we went to an age where we were just flooded with information, where we had no idea. You know, there's no way we could get to it all, And now we're moving into an age where we're going back to the AI coming back and saying, here is the one best possible idea. And it's getting our headset around that, because a lot of us are still in the old stage where we kind of go, I need to know everything. I need to know what the capital of China is. So how do we change that? You know, how do we get our head around that? And amazing things to think about if you think about what we've actually gone through. Like, you know, sort of our generation has gone through not having the internet, not having computers, to having computers, to having the internet, to, you know, all these different things. To, you know, I remember not having a phone, to having a phone at home, to having a, you know, party line, to having a phone at home, to having the dial phone, to having the brick phone in, you know, that you carried around, to the phones going tinier and tinier, and eventually your phone was like this big, to them then going bigger and bigger. We've gone through all of that process. And, you know, with the delegation, lots of times we're looking at people that have actually just come in on this last little stage of it, and they're really good at this last stage. They're really good at technology. I mean, let's face it, a lot of the kids now are amazing. They're kind of born almost with an iPhone in their hand, and you know, we can't compete with them technology-wise, but
No.
we can employ them.
We've covered so much, like literally, we've definitely covered delegation, right? Because you say a delegation coach, but I think it's way more than that. It's like you're the master craftsman of the delegation. So the master of delegation, Lewis. But for our audience, because we've really covered we've been in mindsets, we've been in delegation, emotions, identity and purposes and emotions, a whole lot. So if there was, say, 4 gold nuggets for our listeners, concising that, what would be, they're at this stage where they're just contemplating. I'm 55 years old and I'm going, what do I do? I want to start sort of thinking about selling my business. Where do I start? What would be the 4 nuggets? What would you start with?
Well, the first nugget would be call David. I mean, that's obviously the... But look at the way that you're working now. If you're working more than 4 hours a day, the person that you're going to sell it to, you're expecting them to work that. And lots of people that want to buy your business are kind of looking at it in investor style, where they can have a manager in place. So if you've got a business and you work 14 hours a week, 14 hours a day, and you're earning $100,000, there's no way you could actually replace yourself. So, you know, until you work out that problem, you're not going to be able to sell your business, which is what happened to me. The badge of honor, just look at how many hours you're working and literally work out how you can bring your hours down to a normal amount. You know, even if you bring it down to an 8-hour day, and you can, you know, get your work done in an 8-hour day. The delegation side, definitely delegate. You 100%. You know, I've delegated to Australian staff. I've delegated to offshore staff. I've now delegated to AI, and it makes such a massive difference in your business. If you've already got staff in your business, and you want to actually be able to delegate them, to delegate better to those staff and get more productivity and results from them, definitely attend the masterclass. It'll show you tips and tricks. I've got things like 150 things that you could delegate, 150 things that you should be doing in your business and that you could delegate straight away. I've got lead magnets like, you know, technology-wise, what things should you have in your business technology-wise, and, you know, how could you delegate those, and who do you delegate them to? We've got formulas that tell you, you know, you can see each staff member and what should the staff member be doing and what should they be getting somebody else to do. So there's a whole wealth of information that's there. There's a whole heap of free giveaways to really help you. I mean, my whole thing is I really genuinely want to help people to be able to have the life that, you know, we're meant to have. We're not meant to be working 14 hours a day and, you know, And it makes it super hard to sell if we're doing that.
Oh, brilliant. What we're going to do in the show notes, the ultimate masterclass, we'll put all of those in the show notes, and a whole lot of other different connections that Lewis has got there. But seriously, it's overwhelming going through the process. You can come to me first, but I'm going to refer you to my master team. And Lewis is one of those, because we all need help along the line. My role is really to put a whole lot of masters in their particular realm. As we were talking before, if we're talking about numbers with accountants, we find the best lawyers, the best everyone that can help you on that journey. All of that we'll put into the show notes. That's the very first step. Remember that, the very first step. As we come to an end today, what a journey. So much wisdom and experience and knowledge that this is a fantastic podcast, and it feels like an honor, Lewis, to actually this is a life story from people that have actually lived it, done it, and now they're actually helping you go through the stage. There is so many other people out there that will help you on that journey. It is the next chapter. Don't give up. It's just now we're going to pivot into the next part of our life. So just remember, if this is really helpful for you, this will be helpful for others. If you can subscribe on YouTube, you can subscribe on Spotify, Apple, all of these platforms, please do that. Share that with your friends. Share that with other business owners that are on this journey. Some people at the pre-exit side, some people actually in the middle of it, the mid-X as we call it, and some people at the post. Doesn't matter where you're at, there's so much in the stage that can help other people in that. A big thank you to Lewis, a big thank you to our listeners, and a big thank you to our sponsors, the Business Exit and Beyond, as we were talking about. And we do have a real estate side as well, which is the Business Exit Exchange. I'm the principal of that. We start with the property first, and then we start working our way to the business next. And that's really an interesting journey. We can share that another time. But same thing, all the links on there for both of those different platforms. But the first thing to do is to start that journey. A big thank you to everyone. And remember, a business that's ready to sell is a better business to own. So a big thank you, and we look forward to seeing you on the next podcast.
Thank you very much, Dave. I really appreciate being here.